Hello, I'm Diamond Lewis, Director of DCTV. Welcome to this DCTV Spotlight feature where we shine a light on DeKalb's leaders and unsung heroes, including individuals who are making a positive mark in our communities. We are honored to introduce Shannon Heath-Longino, a powerhouse in affordable housing and community advocacy. As Senior Vice President at Truist Bank, she brings more than 30 years of experience to the Affordable Housing Finance Division. Her extensive background includes leadership roles spanning across multiple states. Shannon was the youngest member to serve on the East Lake Planning Committee as she worked alongside her dear grandmother, Eva Davis, to initiate the redevelopment of East Lake Meadows. Shannon has tirelessly advocated for low-income families throughout her career, focusing on housing, education, health, and community revitalization. Her efforts have earned recognition from Atlanta Magazine, the Atlanta Business League, and Leadership Atlanta. Additionally, Shannon previously served in the United States Army and currently serves as chair of the Drew Charter School's Board of Directors and mentors various programs empowering women and youth. And really, that's only scratching the surface of her amazing and numerous accomplishments. Let's turn now to that interview in DCTV studio with none other than Shannon Heath-Longino. Thank you so much for joining us today in our studio, Mrs. Shannon Heath-Longino.
Yes.
Talk to me about your role. You are the Senior Vice President at Truist Bank, and I've done some research on you, and I understand that you are really living a life of purpose.
Yes.
Talk to me about your work at Truist, and then we'll get into the motivation behind it.
I got you. I've been with Truist, this is going on my 9th year, and Truist has, they pride themselves on, or we pride ourselves on building better lives. And that was one of the things that sparked my interest in going to work with them, because I knew that they were community driven and present in our communities. I've been very elated to know that the work that we do is really live work. It's not just talk, it's actionable behavior that we do in the communities, and they support everything that aligns with my purpose personally, specifically me being raised in East Lake, going out into the world and trying to make sure the world understands the necessities of families. And so Truist truly supports that, and that's been one of the things that I've been very excited about, because they encourage it, they support it, and again, we're present in the communities. So we do put our money in the communities, and we put the work behind it as well. So that's been one of the things that I truly enjoy, because it aligns with my own purpose.
What I love about the work that you're doing is you truly humanize the work behind affordable housing. Talk to me about, it's not about the numbers, it's about the families. Talk to me about that.
I call myself the sacrificial lamb, and my grandmother was a sacrificial lamb. We were sacrificial lambs. And so many people are fazed with other people's opinions. And so sometimes people are afraid to show vulnerability or humble beginnings for fear of judgment or shame. And so, I'm proud of our background, because you gotta understand your beginning and what started it all, and walk with that in life for it to remind you of who you are, whose you are, and then what all of that means. And so our families, people tend to think that kids or families can control their circumstances, and that they ask to be born into poverty. They ask for circumstances, and it's a form of ignorance, because none of us control what we're born into. And so I have those conversations, number one, building relationships first, so that people can get to know me and find a relatable person, a real person, not a statistic, not data, but a real person who has overcome these things. And I use those platforms and use myself as that sacrificial lamb, because at the end of the day, I have nothing to be ashamed of. I am very proud of my upbringing, because it really taught us resilience. It taught us survival. And so some of these things, I call it boot camp. But some of these things you can't learn in school. You can't learn, by somebody looking at a TV or a movie. This is real life for people. It was real life for us. It's real life for families. And my thing of it is to bring those families' experiences to the forefront, because we're not, families aren't looking for handouts. They're just looking for opportunity. They're looking for an even playing field. And when, I use my experiences, how we had to fight through those things, people tend to listen because it is a real person with a real story. And so again, using that and saying, but let's further this conversation. So starting with me, but here's how, it started, and then this is where we are. And so there are many of Shannons out there who are just looking for the opportunity to be pointed in the right direction, to understand where the resources are so people or those families can make choices. What's best for them, and not for society to say, here's what we have, this is what you have to choose from, and this is all you get. That's right. And so we don't want that. We just want to lay out opportunities in each family's uniqueness, be able to choose what is best for their family and what is best for their thriving journey. And that's just what we do. That's what I've been taught to do. That's what I've been living. And I even, I continue to do it in my everyday life. Just remind myself every day of where I started, where am I going? What can I do today? What can I do to be better today? How can I help somebody else to understand how their influence can impact a family who may never be in a room to make those choices or be able to voice their needs? So that's been my journey, and that's some of the things that I walk through every day carrying with me, because you never know when you have to pull it out.
We're going to talk about your upbringing for sure, but you just said something that I've got to focus on. You said there are many other Shannons.
Well, there's only one Shannon, but
a lot of people with the possibility.
Yes, the potential and the possibilities. Yes.
So I read Star Jones's book years and years ago, and when she first got the gig on The View, she said she was the only Black woman at the time. And she said a lot of people would come up to her and say, oh my gosh, you're the articulate one, you're so good, you're so this. And she said it was really a put down, because she said, I was just the one that got the chance, but there are a lot just like me. And so that thought of, there are a lot of folks with potential, don't thumb your nose down at others. I'm not unique in this. It's all about resources, just like you said. It's about that institutional disparities that keeps going on within our communities, and you're working to change that. You're breaking that cycle.
Break down the infrastructure and rebuild it.
That's it.
Break it down and rebuild it. And, I still incur those same, it's kind of a judgment. People think they're complimenting.
That's it.
But it's kind of a judgment. And I still face that, where I have to check people. Because you have to train people.
That's right. How
to receive you and how to treat you. We have to train people of how to receive what our families are saying. We have to train people of what we mean. And it's no disrespect. It's a common courtesy and decency for mankind, for another human being, showing empathy and sympathy, not making assumptions and applying those assumptions to families that you've even never met. And so, again, helping break down the infrastructure, the stereotype that has been there, and then help one day at a time, one conversation at a time, one experience at a time, one person at a time, and rebuild that infrastructure. So it's hard work, it's hard work, but it's worthy work.
I can just feel your passion in the work that you're doing. That passion was put into you at a very young age.
Yes.
I had a special grandma too, by Miss Eva Davis. Talk to me about Mrs. Eva Davis. Talk to me about your grandmother who put this passion in you, and the understanding that these families deserve to live in communities that they can be proud of too.
Yeah. One thing about her, she was a beast at what she did. She woke up every day with a fire in her about what could be better. Number one, her family needed these things, which that included me. She raised me from 2 weeks old till I became an adult. And her daughter was my mom, but she was a young mom. So my grandmother wanted her to continue her growth and path and go figure her life out. In the meantime, I'll take this one here and I will raise her. And that's exactly what happened. But waking up every day, there was seeming like just in our upbringing in our neighborhood, there was something popping off every day. And we just did not know what that was. But she was ready for it. I mean, her phone rang off the hook all of the time. There was no social media. There wasn't any of that. People used the phone and they came and knocked on the door. And she felt the responsibility to go and help families navigate through what that challenge would be, as well as her own. And watching that every day, just puts a fire in me, because if I wanted to be lazy, I could not be lazy. If I wanted to not care and not be concerned and not have empathy, it was not allowed. There's no way you can be around this lady every day and not feel what she was feeling. You got to remember us being raised as children, we empathize and sympathize with our parents. We want to be there for them. And so at that early age, she, grabbed me by the hand and I had to run with her because, again, no babysitter, So I'm seeing all of this front and center. And as a kid, you're in it, so you're not digesting all of it. You're just trying to run with her while she's navigating through it. And so just having a front row seat every single day of how this plays out. And sometimes there were outcomes that were unbelievable, were traumatizing. But sometimes there were outcomes where she was saving somebody's life. She was keeping people from being evicted. She was getting people, helping people put loved ones away who didn't have insurance. She was giving away food. She was getting training for families to get certifications so that they could feed their families. She was bringing the health clinic. I remember East Lake was located on an island where there were no resources. There was no banks. There was no retail. There was no shopping nearby. And we had to take 2 or 3 buses, or you had to kind of catch a ride because a lot of people didn't have transportation. But she was about bringing things to us. I remember her, people would have to take 2 or 3 buses to get to Grady Hospital because that was the closest, the Big Grady was the closest healthcare facility. But she met with Grady and kept raising hell. And that's how the Kirkwood Clinic, which is just a couple of streets over and 1 bus ride, came to the neighborhood because we needed that in our neighborhood. We shouldn't, people are making a determination of, can I get up and afford to go 3 or 4 bus rides to get this medicine? So they rather not get the medicine. They don't feel like making that hump. But that's a life or death choice. And so many families were facing, do I get up and go get my medicine? Do I get up and go to the grocery store? We need groceries. And so she was very forward thinking in, how do we eliminate some of these everyday challenges that the average American and the average household is taking lightly? Like, if you talk to people, they're like, everybody had a grocery store. Everybody had this. Everybody didn't.
That's right.
And so those conversations of helping people to realize, no, everybody didn't. And so if you run into those things, it can spark 1 or 2 things. It can spark anger because you're constantly reminded of how the neglect was there and how people didn't care. Or it can spark passion.
There you go.
And then you take that passion and you go implement it and you make things happen with it. And so all of those emotions that I experienced, the trauma, the good times, the bad times, all of those things. What do you do with it? You go and you use it to the bigger and betterment of a community, because you were there front and center when those no's were happening and those doors were slammed and people were ignorant, and you didn't like feeling that way. So I don't want that passed on. You know, many people can say, well, as long as I'm good, as long as I got what I need, because many people function that way.
Right.
And some people say, why is it my responsibility? I worked hard, I went to school, I got my degree. I could feel that same way, but just because you can, do you do that? Just because you can, is it the right thing to do? And then, are you good with sleeping well at night? Knowing that your influence and your impact, just your voice. Because some people say it's only one voice. Yeah. But it's a voice with impact and influence.
That's right.
And so I think a lot of times we don't understand not only the responsibility we have, but the power that we have. And so although I've worked hard, I continue to work hard. I've raised my family, proud of my kids, proud of my husband. I still have more work to do, because at the end of the day, my grandmother always taught me, she said, don't you ever get too big for your britches. Every morning I wake up and I remind myself to not get too big for my britches. Stay humble. Remember where you came from, because you have aunts, uncles, cousins, friends, church members, neighbors. All of them are trying to find their way, and some of them haven't had the opportunities. You just want to lay them out so when they walk in the rooms that you may not even be present to witness. You just want to lay those platforms for them to be able to walk in rooms and have options. And that's what I do. I want to leave those options, and I'll be off somewhere else working on something else, but give them those options.
That passion that we're talking about started with East Lake Meadows. Your family was the first or second family?
We're the second family.
The second family to move into the community. And over time, this beautiful community where families all work together became, you called it Little Vietnam.
I didn't call it that. People called it that.
You quoted someone to say
it wasn't funny to us to be called that. That's a label. And that was very hurtful at one point in time, because that's the first thing that people slap you with. And it's a sensitive topic for families. It's a sore topic. And so even with people today say, you know, and I have to, again, push past that real quick. When people say, oh yeah, you're talking about Little Vietnam, people still reference that. And so at the end of the day, people are going to be people. But the understanding that I always walk in is, it's not what they call it, it's what you answer to. And so I remember growing up, my grandmother, when we were planning the revitalization, people would say, you know, let's talk about the project. And she would get so offended. We're not projects, we're development.
There you go.
We're not projects. Quit calling us projects, we're development. We're a development. Call these developments. And so she understood her influence and her power. And so as we were working through, we talked about training, and we talked about helping people to understand what words, what actions really help. And so it wasn't that the people were malicious with it.
Sure.
They were repeating. It's a learned behavior. And so
you internalize it.
And you internalize
That's
it.
right.
And so she began to understand what was out there. So she knew, hey, one day at a time, one person at a time, one conversation at a time, but let me train them on what this means. And so then we started getting away from projects, and then the terminology became developments. And the Housing Authority and Renee Glover, it started with retraining people of what is offensive, or how the other person on the other end is receiving what you're saying.
That's right.
And it wasn't I take it as you're trying to hurt me, but let me educate you. And so she was all about educating. Some people call it checking, but she was all about educating and all about training. And they push through and get over that, and then, you move on to something else. But it was a constant. And so even today, you have it where people were frightened about public housing. And then we had to rebrand and train people because the stereotype, we could not get away from the stereotype. Hence, affordable housing.
There you go.
And so people have ran with that, which it has different meanings to different people now. But it's still better than projects. It's still better than, okay, we graduated from developments. So we've seen over time where people's intentionality was good, but we had to train or we had to work together to have understanding of what it means to the people that it's impacting and the people that are receiving what you're trying to do. So the intention was good work, but we have to make sure while we're doing the good work that we don't knock us backwards by hurting the same people that we say we want to help.
What would you say to a young person, not even just young lady, a young person who's watching this, and they may say, wow, she's got it going on. Oh my gosh, I could never be like that. What would you say to that person in terms of believing in themselves, keeping their confidence?
My story is a bit unique, and I had to learn to start telling it because I was so, I had a couple of friends remind me a couple of years ago, you're always making sure people understand your grandmother's story, but you never share your own, and you were there. And I hadn't thought about it like that because, again, all my life I've been helping her and working with her. But I was a witness and lived it and worked in it. And so I had to get comfortable with telling my side because I did the work, but it was more so when you're in it, you just do it because it's work and you don't have time to reflect. You don't have time to think about all that you went through because you're so busy doing the work. And to this day, I've had to kind of train myself to be okay with sharing my work because I was so busy making sure her legacy is protected. But looking in the mirror every day, I'm her legacy.
There you go.
And so the work is not done. And it's basically, she passed the baton and said, okay, I'm tired now. And I'll give it to you. But I was there in training the whole time. And so I had all of the tools. She had equipped me the entire time, and I just needed to think about it, reflect on it, and I had it all along, but now what do I do with it? And so I do take all of those tools that she equipped me with, and I utilize them, and that's why, you see me active, working not just, I work in Rockdale, I work in Atlanta, I'm in DeKalb. My work every day is in different states. I cover different states for Truist in my everyday responsibility. But at the end of the day, you have these platforms. You just can't take them lightly, and you have to make the best of every opportunity. And so I do not walk out of a room with a missed opportunity. I've mentored a lot of people, and I've heard some speakers in some of those mentoring programs. And so I'm a mentor with the Atlanta Hawks She Leads, and they had a speaker one time. One of our theme for the day was shoot your best shot. Because you miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
There you go. And
so I don't go in a room and not shoot a shot because I can't have a regret when I leave of the shoulda, coulda. I have to take my chance, and I'm just not afraid to. And that goes back to the Eva Davis 101 training. And she built that confidence in me, started when I was a kid. What also makes my story a little bit unique, my parents, most people are born and they have parents raising them, either a one household or a two-person household, a mom or a dad. that wasn't my mix. And so you can take that, the average person, that would be a doom for a kid.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Right. But not with Miss Davis. She would not let you have a pity party or not make you feel less than or not worthy, because she gave me that love and that structure and just what I needed. And so instead of being a bitter Betty about circumstances in life, I've embraced those, because nothing happens that God does not want to happen.
That's right.
And the other part about it, if he knew my parents weren't going to be there, he still supplied me with the person that he knew I needed and who would be there. And so instead of focusing on who wasn't and who didn't, I focused on who did and who remained a constant. And that was my motivation. That was my motivation. And she's still my motivation to this day, because she poured heavy to make sure I had everything I needed. And so I owe her that for saving my life and giving me a chance when, the average kid would not stand a chance in those circumstances. So I call myself, when people say, oh, I'm so sorry to hear about your parent, I said, listen, I'm not a victim. I said, I am winning. I beat those odds, and I wake up every day and I'm living proof. I am living proof of what someone says can't, but every day I stand in my greatness because I could, and I still do. I still do.
That's beautiful. And through that, you found your purpose.
Yes,
I thank you for all the work you're doing to give other families and people their opportunities, their chances at life. And certainly we thank Mrs. Eva Davis for all that she put in you, because we are benefiting from it greatly.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me. Grateful to do it.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Well, that wraps up another fascinating conversation. Thanks so much for watching DCTV. I'm Diamond Lewis, and I'll see you next time.